My name's Glendon McKinney. I live in Fredericton. I'm 67 years old. Um, I am, well, this is where it gets complicated. Officially retired from working, although I'm an artist, so that means nothing to be retired. So I actually have several projects that I'm working on, and I'm helping a friend with another project, which is 10 years out of date. Thank you. Anyway, um, I live a fine life. I read books. I have my cat. I watch movies. I think. All right. I don't know what else to say in terms of introduction.
Did you used to travel at all when you were younger, or do you travel? Do you enjoy traveling?
Okay, the travel question. This once again is an odd one. No, we didn't travel very much. It's one of those things that at a certain point in your life you go, wait a minute, we were poor. I never knew I was poor. Right? We were farmers, and we didn't, do that much and make that much money. But I had no idea we were happy. Uh, okay, hold on. All right. Anyway, travel. There's one. Okay, this is okay. Remember, one of the things I said was talking about the past and how I was thinking there's an LP Hartley novel called The Go-Between, which has one of the most famous opening sentences in history, which is the past is a foreign country. They do things differently there. And that is the truth. And once you start to get into, yes, I'm actually going to talk about traveling. I'm getting to that. But the circumstances of the past are completely different from now. I'm sure if you thought, what was my life like 15 years ago? Very different world 15 years ago. Anyway, and that's right. Anyway, so we traveled a little. We went down to Nova Scotia one summer for a drive, little things like that. But one year, and there were two big visits. One was in 1964. We went to Boston. My father had distant relatives, and they were always saying, "Oh, come on down to Boston to visit us." And for some reason, that summer, it was like, "Okay, let's go to Boston." This was incredibly stupid and naive, and we were New Brunswickers, nice Canadians, and we had no idea what we were going into. I won't go on about it at great length, but I will say that the circumstances of our visit became strained because we didn't know these people very well. We were going to visit Boston in 1964, which was number one shortly after the assassination of John Kennedy in 1963, November, and two, after wide race riots, which included Boston. So we got there, right? And it's the first time, and it's like, oh, here's America. My God, the food. How do they eat all this food? I had coffee for the first time. I saw color television for the first time. I saw the Jetsons for the only time in my life. And that was all the fun stuff, right? I had coffee cake for the first time. It's like, ooh, isn't this fun? And then it started to get uncomfortable because they didn't know that my mother's family was Catholic. And so the people we're visiting start to go on about how they're glad that John F. Kennedy was shot because he was Catholic and that Catholics should not be a president. And this just, when you're a kid, I think, wait a minute, where are I, 64? Yeah, I was about 9. So, I'm like wide-eyed looking all over the place, but there's that moment when you start to get the idea that your parents are sort of communicating with each other and not talking a lot. And I became aware that there were looks across the table. And then that got more confirmed. I won't go into it because it's too abhorrent, but things started to be said about Black people. And at that point, my parents both stood up and disappeared into the bedroom. And about 20 minutes later, they came out and said, "Oh, gee, we have to go. We have to go tomorrow." This is like 3 or 4 days before we were supposed to leave. We just forgot, right? we're nice, we were being nice New Brunswickers. They weren't going to say anything, but there was no way we're staying in that house because these people were appallingly racist. And I'd never been exposed to anything like that in my life. I mean, in 1964 in Boston, there were still signs that said for whites only and for blacks only, right? We were at a swimming pool that said for whites only. I never seen this in my life. And it's like being slapped across the face, right? Is, you're a kid and you're going, ooh, look, it's America. Ooh, what's that? And part of this is because my family, it took me years to understand how lucky I was, is I grew up with a very, I guess you call it, blended family. My mother had two sisters. One of them married an Acadian and one of them married a black man. In the Depression, by the way, George Hector, a musician who became fairly well known in New Brunswick. So I got exposed very young to A, the French in New Brunswick, and B, to black people, right? And to a whole world. But very few other people knew this, which, so I'm so eternally grateful for that accident that I was exposed to that, because most people weren't, and ignorance is the basis of a lot of prejudice. So anyway, so that is my travel story. And the other travel story, which is later, is 1967. I went to Expo 67, the World's Fair in Montreal. And it was just like having, it was unbelievable because there was the world, right? We go into the Israel pavilion, we go into Iran, Soviet Union, these are incredible things. And I'm seeing this stuff that I never knew existed. And of course, you start to read and you go, oh, this country, this country, this country, this country. Look at the art, look at the culture, look at the music, et cetera, right? We weren't there that long, but it was a moment when, my world was constrained. It was wonderful. It was the farm and, and school and all this stuff and my friends. But it was constrained by New Brunswick because I'd never seen outside of it. And suddenly I go to Expo and it's like, look, there's a world. And here's part of the world that they've left on your doorstep for you to look at. Right? So that was big for me. That was a big moment. So those are my two visit stories. We didn't travel.
No, but I feel like you just touched on so much when talking about those travel stories.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious, do you think, like you said, you were exposed really early on to like having a black member in your family, and like you kind of understood a little bit more? Do you think that was a general consensus in New Brunswick, or just because you were?
Oh no. My mother and father were, how can I explain it easily? A bit of polar opposites. My father was outgoing, very chatty. He loved to go out, talk to people, tell stories. My mother was much more quiet and shy. So she liked to have just one or two friends. And she confided in me a lot. So there's sort of this, right? But people would come and visit. Of course, that was a part of the world that this you didn't ask about, but I'm going to tell you, was something else that I grew up with, and I think I saw the very last bit of it. I think it's still around. It was a world without television. So people told stories, right? So if, somebody from up the road came down for the evening after supper, they'd sit in the kitchen. Maybe somebody would, my father played the accordion. And so maybe he'd bring out the accordion, they play, or somebody brought a fiddle or something. But more often than that, it's storytelling. And my father knew stories. It's on stories and stories and stories. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized what a phenomenal thing this was. It's an oral culture. right? And that the second television started to come into that, it started to just get rid of it, right? You know, in the 60s and 70s, you start to go and visit people, and suddenly there's a television in the living room. And when you go to visit, they turn it on. That was the visit, right? And you just watch this whole structure crumble. But yeah, it was an oral culture. And, you know, I could go up, even when I was a really small, I could go up, they put me in bed. There was a vent. We had a wood stove. So there was a vent in my room. I could hear the kitchen. They were directly below me, right? So I creep out of bed and lay with my ear on the vent to listen to what the grown-ups were talking about. But anyway, yeah, storytelling. It was a phenomenal thing, and it's other cultures, you know, we revere them for storytelling. The indigenous people, you know, it's wonderful to hear their stories that go on for decades, for centuries, for millennia, right? And we had it, and we've lost a lot of that, you know, but I got to see it. And, you know, we anytime you went to visit somebody, everybody told stories. Yeah. Now, remember that time. It's that. Remember that time. Okay. So that was a benefit of my life.
I'm excited about this question. What was the best party you went to? We have when you were a teenager, but even so, like in...
Oh God. Oh God. Yeah, this is a weird question. This is hold on. This is a very strange question. I had to do a lot of thinking when I saw this. Hold on. I went to a lot of parties. In the trajectory of my life, there was the moment when I turned from the lonely, unhappy kid to the kid at the center. When I was in grade 9, it was the most miserable year of my life. You didn't ask for this backstory, but I'm giving it to you anyway. I was tipping the scales at 230 pounds. I was very large, and it was all unhappiness eating, right? And what would happen was, they don't do this anymore. When I hit high school, at the time, if you missed a class, if you failed a class in high school, you got held back and had to do the entire year again, right? So what happened was, I come out of, you know, the little school the one-room schoolhouse, right, grade 6, into grade 7, which was the whopping huge high school, which had 200 students. Woo! Right? So it was like, oh my God, who are all these people, right? But what happened was 7, 8, and 9, everyone I arrived with fell behind me. So I was all alone in grade 9 with no one I knew, because the students, all my friends, had fallen behind, and they were in grade 8 or grade 7 in a couple of instances. Right? Well, by the way, when I graduated, there were people in my graduating class who were 20, right? Because they had been held back so much. It was an incredibly stupid system, and I think it's gone, and thank goodness for that. But anyway, so what happened was that during between grade 9 and 10, everything changed. Everything changed. I had met a new bunch of people from Cambridge, which is over where the high school was, and a whole bunch of new friends. I started to go out, right? And they took me to parties. We went to dances. I started to drink. I started to take drugs, all these things, right? And suddenly it was like, hey, this is fun. I can have fun. To hell with those people behind me. I can have fun with these new people. And I did, right? So, but the thing was, the two parties I would reference, they have nothing to do with that. They were the two parties where, for the first time, I kissed a boy. That was, and without planning it. Right? And, you know, I'm in high school, and we're in New Brunswick in the 1960s. So we are not talking about exposure to anything gay anywhere, right? But it's, it's here. I'm not thinking about it consciously. Even the words didn't mean anything, like, because they didn't use the word gay. It's homosexual. But suddenly, I go to these parties, and one of them is a real, party. And I was walking outside with this guy, and he was all excited about something, and all of a sudden he grabbed me and kissed me. And it was just one of the most breathless moments of my life. It was like, oh my God. Right. And it happened again a few years later. And that was a huge, huge thing. Huge thing. I actually came out to a couple of my friends before grade 12. And they were exactly the way that you hope, which is, oh, that's cool. What's for dinner? It was not a traumatic thing. So that's lucky, because if I'd had been exposed to the wrong, and there were people who knew and were not friendly, but they stayed at a distance. But at the time is what I'm saying is, again, I'm very, very lucky in the circumstances of my life, because I know other people from that era who were severely traumatized. So anyway, that's the story of the parties. You go to a party and think you're going to have a good time, and then you have a good time, but in a very different way. And you learn something about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of which, your friend group, who would you say was or is your best friend, and how have they impacted you?
This Friends are the single most important thing to me in life. The end. They always have been. And so different eras have different groups of friends, and they tend to last quite a while. My first friend was my first best friend, and I still ache when I think about him. Was my best friend from way before I went to school. He was 1 year younger than me, and he grew up on the farm just up the road from me, and we did everything together. Like we just were friends, right? So I'd go to his house and stay, or my house and stay. I have wonderful memories. I go down and help his family haying when they hayed down further down the road, and we get to ride back on the loads of hay top. And again, this is all the stuff that you were alive. There were moments when we were riding back where the load of hay, of bales of hay, is so high, we have to duck beneath the electrical lines when the tractor is driving, and it's like, no, okay, kids, don't touch the lines, duck. I'm still alive. It was great fun. And we'd go off and we'd play in these cars. We'd build forts together. We'd go skating, and all the childhood stuff. We told each other everything, and it was wonderful. And then it sort of shattered when I went to high school, because he was no longer there. He was still in the little school. So that was the first schism. So, and also this is as a common theme in my life. I hate to have to talk about this, but I've lost 3 people in my life to alcohol, and he was the first. And I know why, and I'm not going to tell the story. It's irrelevant now. But it was watching someone who suddenly veered off the road onto a road that you never expected, and they didn't come back. So I did see him once about a year before he died, and I hadn't seen him for like 25 years. So it was a very strange meeting and very painful. And then, so that was him. And then there was, high school friends. Ironically, most of them are dead. This happens in life and you don't expect it, right? Somebody said, yes, that horrible moment when you change the tense from is to was, that is, right? And you just go, oh, right, yeah. But I have friends now who are my friends from Toronto, York, the people I met first year university, and they're still my best friends. We've seen each other through a lot, right? And that's what it's about. So friendship, friends will forgive things that other people won't, including families. So that's what I think. That's about friends and me. You know, I value them more than anything in the world. And in literature, it's curious because it's a theme that doesn't come up nearly enough in the arts. And it's one of the things. I have a friend who I was having a bit of a to-do with over the Harry Potter books, which I love and I pretty much read every year. Because she's going, oh, well, I wasn't crazy about the plot. And I said, plot, who cares? There was only 7 plots and the Greeks figured those out thousands of years ago. I said, no, it's about friendship. It's about those 3 characters, right? And when one of them wanders off, the other 2 go out and say, you can't wander off. You have to do it, right? So, you know, Hermione and Ron and Harry, they're together in every single book, right? And they can't be separated. And when they do separate, it's usually bad, right? That to me that's why those books are really important to me. And there's not a lot of depictions of friendship in, you know, you get lots of movies where, oh, 2 people are friends and then they hook up and okay, they aren't friends anymore. Or, you know, just they're temporary friends, but long-term friendship is really something that is important to me. And so yeah, I mean, if you looked at my contact list on my email, 2/3 of it is people that I've known for over 40 years. Mind you, I still make friends. That's the important thing. And that was something else that happened in my childhood. I grew up around old people and now it's reversed itself. I'm the old person now, but I have you know, friends who are in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s. That's really important, is always to have a mix of people because they're going to be looking at life and experience in many different ways, in ways that you haven't thought of.
That's very true. What do you think is key to being a good friend?
Putting up with their annoyances. There's the moment after you get to know them, like there's the first moment where you go, oh, this person's really great. Let's hang out. Okay, that's great. We share these interests, blah, 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 right? And you go on, and it just, this is this moment months later where I go, oh my God, when he does that, I just want to slap him. You know, oh, I want to shake her silly when she says that. And then you go, this isn't a problem. This is just an annoyance. I can live with it.
Yeah.
It isn't that important.
Yeah.
That's it right there.
That's very true.
Mind you, there are still times I don't hesitate in being sarcastic as I've grown older. I thought, oh, you can just point these things out. Fine. But no, that's it, is being patient. And because they offer other things that are much more important than any annoyances.
Very true. You mentioned Toronto. What do you miss the most about Toronto?
I don't want to ever live in Toronto again. One of the ironies is that the Toronto I knew is gone. It's gone forever. Curiously, it's preserved in a film, which is, there's a great film from the 70s called Outrageous with Craig Russell. I watched that at 2 levels because on the one hand, there's the movie itself, but on the other hand, it was almost all shot in locations. And it's the Toronto I arrived in and grew and lived in for a long time, right? The positive, the Toronto has become developed unbelievably. They've destroyed so much of what I knew and built these horrible buildings. And everybody I know says, don't come back. Don't even think about it. It's all gone. And I mean, I've gone on Google Maps and walked around the city and went, oh my God, right? Everything you knew is gone. By the way, this is something that happens when you grow older that you don't expect and you don't think about, is what is normal for you now will disappear. It won't just recede, it will be removed, right? And you just go, wait, didn't there used to be a building there? What's that thing, right? But the strength of Toronto, it was when I got there, and it still is. It is the most diverse city on the planet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is, and I'm talking everything: culture, arts festivals, languages. You can go to Little India, you can go to Little Chinatown, you can go to the gay village, you can go to everybody, the Jamaican part, right? That was it, right? And I lived for a long time on one of the great cross streets, St. Clair, which has also been ruined. But anyway, but I was right on the edge of the Italian village, right? So I could just like, just like, la la la, leaving yourself alone. What's along here? And I suddenly start to just, what's this? Oh my goodness, like food I've never heard of before, right? And then you go along further and there's a Jamaican section. It's like, oh, Jamaican patties, what's that? Here, I'll try that, right? And then you get music, and then you get art, and then you get the street festivals, right? And you get all these, everybody's having a celebration at some point in Toronto, right? That's one of the great strengths of the city, right? It is just, it's wonderful. The problem is that the city's become this thing, and development has taken over. Anyway, I'll spare you that. But it was, and the other thing, it's a walking city. This is really important. When I am a huge walker, and I always was, and nobody walks in Fredericton, I've noticed. And I constantly have to tell people what's going on in Fredericton because they don't walk, they don't see things. Anyway, I didn't notice that. Yeah, that's because you're in your car or on your cell phone. So yeah, Toronto was wonderful. I have incredibly wonderful memories. But I will never go back. I don't have no desire to go back. I talk to friends if I need to on Zoom, which I use, as I said, I resist. But some of them aren't that thrilled either. And also the current government, well, we'll get into that. But anyway, they're not thrilled with Mr. Ford. Anyway, but Toronto was wonderful. It was just like stepping into the world to me, right? Suddenly there are all these different languages, all these different cultures, all this different food and music and movies and everything, right? And it was just like, feed me more, feed me more. So yeah, it was a wonderful thing.
No, that's very true though, that I could imagine it would be very different.
Oh yeah. Also, by the way, they had the Cinematheque Ontario, which was absolutely orgasmic, which is it's a cinema built just for cinema. And they have access to the entire history of film, and you watch them properly on film. And on Super 8, 16, 30, or 32 and 70 millimeter, right? They have all the projection, they have superior, and you see things you cannot see anywhere else, right? There's an entire world connected of cinematheques. So there was that. I practically lived there.